Hello, my name is Matt Reardon, and thanks for watching this Wednesday evening West weather update brought to you by Nutrien Ag Solutions. To start here, we're looking at impressive satellite imagery of this low pressure system spinning just off the coast of California here this afternoon on Wednesday. It's pretty easy to see that cyclonic spin there, this counterclockwise spin in the atmosphere and these low-level clouds here off the coast. We often say, as meteorologists, that these big spins have little spins associated with them, and I think you can see that looking at this video here. You'll notice this broad area of cyclonic flow around the cyclone here. Certainly the center of it somewhere here, kind of tracking over the last 24 hours down the coastline of California. But if you look closely, here's San Francisco here, the Bay Area. There's this little spin up here, now making its way on shore. It's almost kind of this little kind of vortex here. We call them meso vortices, or this mesovortex in the singular. Marine warnings have been posted for some of the coastal water surrounding the Bay Area. We've seen some lightning associated with some of the thunderstorms spinning around this. So it's kind of a curious feature we're keeping an eye on. Some of the thunderstorms that have moved in to the inland parts of California have had small hail and thunder reported with them. So an impressive storm system. It's really been impacting Oregon over the last 48 hours with rain and snowfall in some of the upper elevations. This will continue to impact certainly the state of California as we go through the next 24 hours. With advisories, watches, and warnings in some capacity throughout the state. You can even see kind of an area of increased moisture and clouds through southern California. We're seeing rainfall in the Los Angeles metro area, even all the way through San Diego this afternoon here. And taking a closer look at that, this is the current radar loop across the southwest United States. You can see rainfall and some of the stronger showers and even thunderstorms moving into the North Valley of California. And there's that flux of rainfall through the far southern end of the state, the Los Angeles metro area, and San Diego as well. Snowfall, additional snowfall coming to the state, which has reached its record snowpack, and we've added Utah to that list as well of states this winter reaching record snowpacks. We're expecting more of that as the storm system makes its way across the state of California this evening. So additional snowfall coming to the Sierra Nevadas, currently more impacting the northern Sierra Nevadas and the Klamath Mountain ranges right now. We take a quick review of current hazards out from NOAA as of this afternoon. There's those winter storm warnings in this pink color, really all the way up and down the Sierra Nevadas. We even had flood watches posted for the foothills of the southern Sierra Nevadas, an area where we have unfortunately seen a lot of flooding in 2023 already. That will continue as some of these flood advisories localized to areas across the valley. Winter weather advisories across Southern California, even some local winter storm warnings in the elevations, the mountains east of the Los Angeles area. Some of these kind of beige warnings here are wind warnings and high wind warnings for New Mexico, Eastern California, Nevada, Arizona, as this potent low pressure system makes its way across the western interior. We're expecting winds to increase as a result of that. Some additional snowfall will come to the northern Colorado Rockies, prompting some of these purple winter weather advisories. That's really, we consider that a step below a winter storm warning, that pink color that you can see here for the Sierra Nevadas. We mentioned that this event has really already been impacting the area. Certainly Oregon receiving rainfall out of this one, the Willamette Valley getting additional rainfall here in 2023. Not so much focused on the state of Washington, but now making its way through California. We would expect additional rainfall coming to the coastal areas of California as a result of this, and those windy showers and thunderstorms coming onto the coastline here over the next 12 to 16 hours or so, and then Southern California just getting its recent shot of rainfall out of this. Some of that's starting now to move out of the area to the south into Mexico. As far as water is concerned, this is a conversation that we've talked about not only in 2023 as it's fallen, but eventually this conversation will shift to the water that's really held up in the snowpack, and that record California snowpack that we've talked about. If we take a look at recent satellite imagery across the San Joaquin Valley, looking really at the southern part of the Central Valley of California here, if we scroll over, we can see from recent satellite imagery, there's that very white, reflective record snowpack in the Sierra Nevadas. That, again, will begin to melt over the next month or two, and it's going to make its way through the waterways of the Central Valley of California. And one of the destinations for it, unfortunately, will be the Tulare Lake bed. The Tulare Lake bed is a historic lake. It used to be filled with water, since has been converted to cropland here in Southern California, and you can really see the outline of that lake here in this beige color. And unfortunately, that refilling of the lake has already begun. If you see this murky, kind of muddy brown color, that is existing standing water. So we've already seen this kind of chronic flood risk creep up now to the point where we have some agricultural fields. You can even see some localized spots surrounding the town of Corcoran, kind of historically associated with the Tulare Lake bed. Some of that flooding making its way into the area here already in March. And this could potentially be an issue through April and May as we get more of the flooding and more of those waters melting, moving out of the high elevations of the Sierra Nevada. So we're keeping an eye on that. Again, some of these standing water existing beyond the lake bed as these rivers make their way into the western part of the valley here. As far as these forecasts, looking out really through the end of this event here, I'll start this loop from the ECMWF forecast here, valid as of Wednesday evening here on the 29th. There's that low pressure system we just looked up, spinning off the coast of California. As we go through the evening tonight, it'll make its way through central and southern California, eventually moving inland across southern California. Some more rainfall expected for the Los Angeles metro area. But as we go through the day on Thursday, really more so impacting the interior of the West. So Utah, expecting additional snowpack there. We've seen quite a bit this winter. Idaho, getting another round of snowfall. Montana, western Wyoming, that's where we saw those purple winter weather advisories early in the video. And then parts of Arizona and New Mexico getting additional shots of precipitation, rain in the lowlands, snow certainly for the upper elevations. As we go through Friday and through the weekend, we're seeing another system really focusing on Washington and Oregon as the jet stream kind of focuses on that area versus California or Southern California and Arizona. We're seeing more of a focus on the Pacific Northwest. And you can see that as I step through Saturday into Sunday. You can see that kind of bullseye and snowfall over the Cascades, the upper elevations in Washington and Oregon, but heavier rain on the coastline, potentially getting into the Willamette Valley. Could see some light rain or moderate rain at times getting into eastern Washington and the Palouse. So we'll be keeping an eye on that for areas which are still currently in drought. We've talked about that recently, certainly. And then through Sunday, getting additional snowpack to some of the upper elevations in the Snake River Mountains, or Salmon River Mountains north of the Snake River in Idaho. And eventually by Monday, that storm system makes what I'm calling at this point here a glancing blow through northern and maybe central California. And what I mean by that is I'm expecting additional snowfall for the central and northern Sierra Nevadas, but not kind of a repeat of these recent low pressure systems, which have been higher impact weather events to the coastline of California. You'll notice this one kind of quickly made its way inland, quick shot of snowfall for the Sierra Nevadas, perhaps some light rain getting into the Central Valley or far southern California, but I'm not even convinced of that right now, given the trajectory of the storm and how quickly it's trying to race inland, where it potentially becomes a very impactful storm for the middle part of the United States. This is looking out all the way to April 4th. This is next Tuesday. Too early to talk specifics here, but certainly for folks in the central or eastern part of the country, this could be something to keep an eye on in terms of severe weather in the Midwest, and then obviously looking at quite a bit of snowfall or blizzard conditions in the Great Plains. One thing we've noticed, I'm switching over to the GFS here just to give you an idea of this, is we've seen kind of next week, let's call it the 7 to 11 day time frame. I'm really talking April, maybe 6th to the 8th, some model variability. And by that I mean some of the models have been drying out the west over the kind of the end of the next week time frame after we see that Pacific Northwest storm system come through. Sometimes they have been tracking back, trying to bring another atmospheric river or stronger low pressure system into the area. And we're just kind of looking at the GFS here. This is all the way out April 5th, Wednesday of next week. And you notice that we keep that forecast dry through the end of next week. This is all the way out to next Friday. But we do have something of a powerful storm system spinning up just off the coastline. We call these fish storms. They're impacting no life or property in terms of humans, but perhaps some fish swimming out in the Pacific Ocean. And if we look at the European model, jumping back here, this is Tuesday, April 4th. There's that storm system we talked about exiting the west, exiting the Pacific Northwest, becoming a problem for the central part of the country. But if I step this forecast out through Thursday, Friday, the end of next week, calm, dry conditions across the west. So I think what we might be seeing here is the models starting to resolve that shift to a drier pattern that we talked about, at least to start April, in some of our earlier videos. We might be seeing that here from both the ECMWF and the GFS. Now, I'm mentioning that model variability because some of the runs, not only from the GFS, but the European model from yesterday showed the potential for an additional storm system coming through California, more similar to the ones we saw recently. So there is some model variability there, some lower confidence in the forecast for the end of next week, or maybe even all the way into next weekend. But at least these latest model runs shifting drier, having us think we might be shifting into that drier pattern for April. As far as snowfall forecast over the next week, I won't take this all the way out to April 6th because we talked about the variability there. But if I bring it back to maybe April 6th or the 5th, we can see an additional shot of snowfall for the Sierra Nevadas, quite a bit more in the Cascades. Again, that jet stream focusing more on Washington, Oregon, and then the upper elevations in Idaho, Utah, far northern Utah, and Wyoming, getting more focus in terms of their snowpack from this system, again, as that jet stream focused more on the northern half of the western part of the United States. We talked about that model variability in the kind of late next week time frame. I think to get an idea of that, we have to look out at the jet stream forecast. This is looking valid as of Wednesday. I'll take this current here. Here's the storm system we're talking about right now, spinning off the coast of California. You'll notice as I take this through Thursday, that makes its way to the interior, where it's now affecting the middle part of the country, that jet stream kind of shifting off into the central U.S. As I take this through Friday and Saturday, you'll notice another tongue of that Pacific jet stream making its way into Oregon. There's that kind of Pacific Northwest focused storm we're seeing really starting to impact the area late Friday into Saturday morning. The rain and the snow for the Willamette Valley, eastern Washington, and certainly snow in the Cascades. That makes its way through the area through the weekend on Sunday and Monday, where it tries to make that glancing blow that we talked about through California. But as I take this through next week, we really calm down the pattern out west, and we tend to kind of amplify that jet stream in a way that I think is lending to some model variability. You're noticing not kind of a strong signal here, something of a trough south of Alaska, maybe even a ridge. We haven't talked about a ridge in the west for a while, making its way over Washington and Oregon and Northern California, and potentially kind of a high over low pattern. What I mean by that is a ridge over something of a trough in Mexico here. This certainly wouldn't be wet for the western U.S., potentially some rainfall moving in through parts of far northern Mexico, or perhaps some glancing shots of rain to southern or central Arizona and New Mexico, but not a big wet pattern here for California, but something of lower confidence just in how disjointed this jet stream is at the end of next week. And I think that's lending to some greater model variability in our forecast. So we're expecting a clearer picture to come through here as we go through the weekend and we get some of this additional model data in coming up on that next time frame there. As far as the ECMWF ensemble, their rainfall forecast through the beginning of April, again, that kind of variable time frame we talked about, this is looking just at the 10 days after April 1st. And you'll notice that dry signal is still there for California, certainly the Sierra Nevadas, which have received all that recent snowfall. Pacific Northwest, we see that rainfall there. I think part of that is due to some of the kind of near-term rainfall in the forecast for the Cascades in Washington and Oregon that we talked about. But as far as California, Arizona, Nevada, Southern California, we're seeing a break here in that wet forecast, at least looking at the European models forecast for the first 10 days of April. If we look over at the GFS, their ensemble forecast, I think we see quite a bit of agreement here. Again, looking at the first 10 days of April, drier in California, drier through Southern California, the Los Angeles metro area, probably not seeing some of these additional big atmospheric river, strong low pressure systems, hail reports in California, or tornado reports. Nothing set in stone when we're talking about a 10 to 14 day forecast, but this is certainly the trend in some of these long range ensemble models as we get into the first part of April here, with potentially a bias toward precipitation in the Pacific Northwest or for the elevations in Idaho or the northern interior Rockies. If we look at temperature, I should say, over the same time period, this is looking out really the first, again, kind of the 10 days of April here. And if I walk this back, I'll make this valid April 1st through April 11th, first 10 days of April. Those cooler temperatures expected to continue across the western U.S. This is partially because we have quite a bit of snowpack, certainly over Nevada, Utah, and California, but also we have a negative PDO. And what I mean by that is we have a lot of cold water off the west coast of the United States, and that will just generally keep things cooler across the western coastal regions in the meantime. Certainly through April is the expectation for a continuation of that colder temperature pattern. As far as the Climate Prediction Center, looking at what they're seeing for the next 6 to 10 days, that's kind of in that variable time range I talked about where we have lower confidence in that forecast. If we look at temperatures over that time frame, not a surprise to see that colder temperature. We talked about the negative PDO keeping things cooler along the coast, and that heavy snowpack. We're expecting additional snow in Idaho, additional snow in the Sierra Nevadas, Nevada proper, and Utah, where we have a record snowpack. It would make sense that we keep conditions cooler out there as a result of that. But as far as precipitation, that April 4th to April 8th timeframe, the Climate Prediction Center calling for a slightly above average precipitation signal here. That's surprising in a sense because we have seen some of these recent model runs shift drier for California in this time frame. Maybe not drier for the Pacific Northwest, but I would say drier for California and Southern California and Arizona. What I think we might be seeing here is just a byproduct of that variability we saw in the models, kind of switching back and forth from wetter to drier, and the fact that this forecast may have been issued earlier here on Wednesday the 29th, if you can see that issue date here before some of those drier model runs came in. But it does reflect a good point that we're not as confident in that late week forecast next week as maybe we typically are. But shifting beyond that, the 8 to 14 day temperature outlook, we still keep that cooler temperature signal, but you'll notice the graphic on the right, that precipitation signal. Now the Climate Prediction Center coming into agreement with April 6th through the 12th, maybe that second week of April, that drier pattern has now moved in to parts of California, Nevada, maybe even Oregon and Idaho as well. As far as the 1 month forecast for April, we talked about this in some of the recent videos, but they are seeing that drier signal for April for parts of California, Arizona, Nevada, and Utah. If we shift over and we look at the MJO, trying to get an idea of what we might be seeing in that 2 to 3 week time frame, high confidence that the MJO will be returning to the Western Pacific. That's this phase 6 here. And we talked about the potential for potentially an active Pacific Northwest type setup here in the 6 and 7 phases. I think we're seeing that if we look out through this weekend at the forecast there, expecting rain and snow for Washington, Oregon, and Idaho. If we look to climatology at your typical phase 7 MJO pattern in April, during an INSO neutral like we're in currently, we can see troughiness over the Pacific Northwest. I think that would tend to promote more systems coming in on shore in Oregon and Washington like we're seeing this weekend. If we try to extrapolate this MJO into the end of April, and what I mean by that, if I take you back to this MJO, the Batten-Julian oscillation, high confidence that early in April it'll be in phase 6, getting into phase 7, kind of in that first and second week there, and you could extrapolate that the MJO tends to move around this graph in a counterclockwise motion like this, that at some point in April, perhaps mid to late April, we'll be shifting into phase 8 of the MJO. If we look at that typical pattern again in an April INSO neutral environment, we tend to get more ridging off the western part of the North American continent. This would bring potentially more mild temperatures, so less cooler temperatures into the western U.S., and keep some precipitation out of the area in terms of California, Oregon, and Washington. So we might be seeing something of that dry signal here getting into the end of the month. If we take a look at the long-range European model forecast for April, this is looking out over April 6th to May 6th, I think we can see potentially some of that signal with the drier California, drier in the Sierra Nevadas, drier in parts of western Oregon, and Washington with potentially a mixed signal east of the Cascades. So potentially drier as we end the month of April. We could be seeing that shift as early as next week as the storm system exits here over the next few days, keeping in mind some of the model variability in that kind of April 4th to April 8th time window. If we want to talk about beyond that, getting into May, getting into the summer months across the West, I think that conversation shifts towards sea surface temperatures where things move a bit more slowly. As far as INSO, that is El Niño versus La Niña, we've certainly seen the disappearance of La Niña recently, and if we look now in the central tropical Pacific, not really any cold water left to speak of except for maybe just kind of a mirage along the equator there, but waters have been warming up to average rather quickly, hence we are in INSO neutral. But if we look just off the coast of California, there's that strong negative Pacific Decadal Oscillation, or PDO, I mentioned earlier in the video, and that's this cold tongue of blue water here, cooler than average ocean temperatures south of Alaska, west of the U.S. coastline, kind of extending to the southeast of Hawaii here. There's our negative PDO that I think is going to influence cooler temperatures in the long range. What I mean by long range is at least through April, potentially into May or even early summer. And as far as INSO long term, looking at where we might be going in terms of La Niña versus El Niño, the forecasts have been consistent this spring. We're calling for the potential of an El Niño to develop this summer. Now, it's not uncommon after getting out of a La Niña winter that we do warm up into an El Niño in the central tropical Pacific, but it's not a given. And if we look at some of these forecasts, we see probabilities for El Niño through the summer, at least early fall, maxing out around 65, getting closer to 70%. So that's the expectation right now, is that we could see an El Niño this summer. Not a given though, like I said, but if we were to shift into an El Niño and then hang on to it, probability is about 60% that we're still in it from November, December through January. We could be seeing more of a winter setup like this one, where we have extensions in the Pacific Jet like we saw earlier this year in 2023, which would bring more storm systems, more potential atmospheric river-like events to central and southern California, parts of southern Nevada, certainly Arizona, and then through Mexico and the southern part of the United States in total. Warmer in the Pacific Northwest as well. We saw cooler temperatures certainly this winter. I think this would bring a pattern shift to parts of the Pacific Northwest and bring in warmer temperatures versus what we saw at the end of 2023. But we're talking about a 60% chance here, so not a given. Certainly when we're talking about a long-range forecast all the way out into winter of 23 into 2024. And then to add a caveat even on top of that, this El Niño pattern is variable. It won't look exactly like this every year. We do get changes in this jet stream, which can affect the areas that get the brunt of that atmospheric river, whether it extends farther north into central and northern California or stays south into Mexico. So something to keep an eye on, but not anything too detailed right now in the forecast. That's all I have this evening. Thank you for watching.